Hello, everybody! Welcome to Earlham College. You can't see me, but I'm here. I'm so excited that you're here tonight to talk about our off-campus programs. With us tonight, we have some wonderful panelists who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. And feel free at any point, if you have questions, just submit those so that we can make this web chat as tailored to you as it can be. So, Anastasia, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Anastasia. Originally, I'm from Russia. I'm a senior here at Earlham. I major in Peace and Global Studies with minors in Journalism and Middle East Studies. And I'll be happy to share anything with you that you might be interested in.
And where did you study abroad?
I studied abroad in Jordan. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Max Kremley-Effinger. I am an international student advisor in the International Programs Office. I'm also a graduate of Earlham College, and I participated in 2 study abroad programs. I did a semester-long program in Germany and Austria, and then I did a month-long May term in Mexico.
And I'm Jennifer Lewis. I'm the Associate Director of International Programs, so I work primarily with study abroad, or with off-campus study, I should say. And this is my 13th year at Earlham.
Let's just clarify really quick here that when we say study abroad and then we correct ourselves to off-campus study, why is that?
Because we have both off-campus programs that are domestic programs. We have some programs that are in Philadelphia and New York. We also have some May terms that are domestic, but then we have international programs as well.
So could you guys also clarify what the difference is between an Earlham study abroad program or study abroad programs at other colleges that these students may be looking at?
I don't want to answer all the questions. So we mainly have Earlham programs that are led by either an Earlham faculty leader or a resident director. In all of those programs, students live with host families. In a lot of cases, they do some sort of a service learning placement, but those are all run by us completely. And then we also have what are called approved programs. So those are programs that are run by either another third-party provider or another school, another college, but our students are able to participate in those programs and their financial aid goes with them. A student's financial aid is available for one program, either an Earlham program or an approved program.
Great. So actually, Timothy, the question that he already submitted was about do students ever study abroad more than once? And Max is an example of this, but is that common for students to study abroad more than once?
I would say we have a lot of students who do what Max did, who do either a May term and a program, who may do more than one May term. We do have some students who do more than one program, semester-long program. It's a little trickier because your financial aid only applies for one program, so that's very dependent upon a student's financial situation.
And we did have a number of students who asked about affording a study abroad program. So when Jen talks about your financial aid carrying over, that really does mean that you would pay as much to go to school at Earlham as you would to go abroad, but it's fun to go abroad for that. Ian from Ohio wants to know, how many classes does a student take while they're abroad?
I think it really depends on the program. When I was there, I think all the programs are 18 credits, if I'm not mistaken.
All the Earlham programs.
Yes, and so I had 5 classes and an internship placement when I was in Jordan. So it sounds like a lot, but actually I was pretty flexible and it all worked out really well. So yeah, I'm not sure how about others. How many classes?
All the Earlham programs are 18 credits, and most of them are about 5 courses, but I think we give you 18 credits for those programs because I think we take into account that the entire experience is you're learning constantly. Everything you're doing, you're learning. So we give you a full semester's worth of credit for that. But for approved programs, a lot of those programs are 16 credits.
Max, how many credits did you get when you were on your May term?
For the May terms, they're all 3 credits, and they're really intensive programs. So it's 3 or 3.5 weeks, and you're spending a great deal of time with the Earlham group, but you're also doing a lot of actual work. I think that is a difference from some other institutions' programs. that these are not just vacations or trips to Europe to see the place. You do that, but you also are expected to learn a lot. You do classroom learning, you learn from your host families, you learn from your professors and your fellow participants. So there's a lot of work involved with these programs, but it's just a really great experience because you aren't just a tourist, you're living in these places and you're learning from the people there.
Actually, Naisha from North Carolina asked about housing when you're studying abroad. So you mentioned a host family. Does every family, or does every student live with a host family?
On all of the Earlham programs, they do. Every student lives with a host family, and sometimes in pairs, sometimes in triples, sometimes in singles. It just depends on the program. But maybe Anastasia wants to talk a little bit about your experience.
I lived in a host family, and pretty much we all had very different families when we were in Jordan, and some people had, a small family, young mom and dad and a little kid, and I had 4 siblings, so it was pretty different. But I think living in a host family is a great experience, especially when you go to places like you've never been to, like Jordan. I think going somewhere in Central America and living in a host family would be challenging for me as well. So it's definitely a great part of study abroad. And just to comment on something that Jennifer said before, about the amount of work is actually not the same academically, but because of that rigorous, there is challenging atmosphere on the study abroad programs, and that definitely pushes you to your limits when you go somewhere like Jordan. So I felt like I was doing actually all 18 hours of work, and mentally and emotionally and physically too sometimes, because you have to adapt to life in the city, whereas here you're on campus, it's small, and so yeah.
So in the pre-questions, Lauren from Kentucky had asked if there are language requirements, and now Timothy also is wondering how often is language immersion a part of your study abroad experience?
I can answer that question, and then maybe you two can talk about your experiences. We have a number of programs that are language-based programs, so like our program in Spain, France, Jordan, and Germany, Austria used to have a language requirement. It no longer does. But for those programs, it's a 2-semester requirement that you have to have the equivalent of 2 semesters worth of language prior to going on the program. And that's because the whole program is conducted in that language. So all of your courses are in that language, your interactions with your host family, and ideally your interactions with your program mates as well. But maybe you two could talk about your experiences.
Well, for me, it was mostly, we had classes in English except for Arabic language class, but I had to communicate, and most of us had to communicate with host families and people in Arabic because not so many of them spoke English, even though, of course, we needed to make sure that someone from our family speaks English, because we came, and some of us came with very basic level. I did take 2 semesters, but I had a year after, between the last semester of Arabic and the time when I went to Jordan, and it was quite challenging for me. But the immersion definitely helped. It was challenging, but I spoke, after a month, I spoke pretty well, I think. Yeah.
I had 2 quite different experiences. When I studied in Germany, Austria, I had been taking German for 4 years already and felt pretty comfortable with it. And German ended up being my major. But then when I studied in Mexico, that was after my senior year, and I had only had 2 semesters of Spanish, so it was really different going to Mexico with 1 academic year of Spanish under my belt as opposed to Germany. But I felt like I could see how quickly my Spanish was improving in just 3.5 weeks in Mexico, because I went from such a low basic level to being able to communicate with my host family and getting to meet lots of amazing Mexicans while I was there. So it was a really great experience, both of them. But I felt like I was just advancing really quickly when I was studying in Mexico, since I started from such a low level.
I think it's also important to add that we have some programs that are English-speaking programs. We have a program in New Zealand, we have a program in Northern Ireland, in London, but we also have some programs where you learn elements of language, but you don't have a language requirement to go on the program. So, for example, in Tanzania, you learn some Kiswahili while you are there, but we don't offer Kiswahili on campus, so that's not a requirement of the program. Or the Tibetan Studies program, students are not required to know any Tibetan before they go, but they learn some Tibetan as part of the program.
So Max, you also mentioned how German ended up being your major. Was that influenced by your study abroad experience?
In some ways, yes, it was. I didn't go on the program because I was going to be a German major, and I didn't become a German major because I went on the program. But I just went on the program because I really wanted to continue improving my German, and I wanted to have the experience of living there. So I don't want to cut into the other question that we're going to have. But also, it just... The experience of going doesn't have to be directly related to your major. Right. When I studied there, and then when I helped lead the program in 2011, we had people from all over campus, biochem majors studying in Germany, music majors, psychology majors. So I was a German major who studied in Germany, but that doesn't have to be the case. And I think that's a really amazing thing about these programs. Anastasia wasn't a Arabic major, but she went on this program. So it really provides opportunities for you to go where you want to go, not where your major says you need to go.
And we think that makes for a richer experience for everyone involved in the program, that these are really a true extension of Earlham as a liberal arts institution, that these truly are liberal arts programs. And the conversation about peace studies or conflict resolution is a richer one when there's a peace and global studies major and a human development and social relations major and a biochemistry major and a journalism major in the room, because they're thinking about those issues from different perspectives, and it makes for a richer and more interesting conversation.
Simon just asked, how much freedom do students have while they're studying abroad? Or in other words, how much of your time is programmed already and how much are you able to decide for yourself?
Because you can really, from my perspective, you can look at it both ways, because as a woman in Jordan, I didn't really have that much freedom in terms of, I had a curfew in my host family, and that's one of those challenges that you will have to adjust to, because you're traveling to a different country where the cultural setting is so different. But in terms of studies, I guess you still commit to a big chunk of your time to academics, but at the same time you do have a lot of free time that, in my experience, we were encouraged to explore things, even though we could do anything with that time. But we tried to, go here and there and try to travel around Jordan, and it came mostly from students. So we kind of sit down and we would think where we want to go. We'll organize, and our instructor sometimes was happy that she didn't have to take part in all that because we were so eager to just go out and explore. And so I think from things that I've heard about other programs like Spain, London, students have the same kind of opportunity to explore things. And a lot of students take advantage of that. And so they spend all their free time, or the majority of their free time, apart from academics, exploring things and getting new friends. I don't know, traveling to other countries sometimes. I know some of my friends went to Israel, Palestine, even though we were not permitted to travel while on the program. We could do it after the program officially ended, but that's due to specific concerns in the region. It's not like that in other programs. Yeah. And
I was going to say, I think it partly depends on where you are, because you are a little more restricted in some ways than some students on other programs. But for example, in the New Zealand program, they have blocks, the whole semester is divided into blocks. And there are certain blocks where they're living in homestays, and they are, they're going to classes, they're going to their volunteer placements, and they have a bit of flexibility. There are other blocks where they are really traveling together as a group. They are living in a communally, and there's not a lot of free time or not a lot of flexibility to explore outside of that. So I think it in Tanzania is similar, that it travels around and they really spend a lot of time together. So I think it partly depends on the program.
Kayla from California. Hi, Kayla. I don't know if you remember me, but we interviewed together. Wanted to hear more about your Japan programs, plural. So if you want to elaborate.
Well, I will be honest and say we have a whole separate office, Kayla, that works with the Japan programs. So I'm not the most knowledgeable about those programs, to be frank. I don't know if either of you know a ton more about them, but we have two. One is the SICE program that they're both run by Earlham. One program is the SICE program that is in Morioka, Japan. It's run by an Earlham faculty leader. The other is the Japan Studies program, and that is a Japan Study program. And that's a GLCA program, meaning that's a consortial program, which we run from here, but we have students from other schools who go on that program as well. And there's a semester-long option or a year-long option for that program, and that one's based in Tokyo.
And there also are quite a few May terms that come up that go to Japan. There have been some about geology related to Japan, and now there's one going that's about a specific identity group in Japan. And I think that's something that's really exciting about the May terms, is that they really follow faculty and student interests, so they can change over the years. So we have some May terms that have been going every other year for 10 years, but we have other ones that a group of students or faculty come together and have an idea and then go and do that program, and they do some really amazing things for these short-term May terms.
There was a May term in Japan a couple years ago that looked at food in Japan. So just to add to as one other possibility.
So these are kind of, I'm going to just take the liberty of grouping some questions here together. Lauren asked about being a Bonner Scholar as well as studying abroad, whether that's possible. And Victoria was wondering if students who are double majors are still able to study abroad and graduate on time. And then there's also a question about, are athletes available to study? Are they okay studying abroad? So 3 parts: Bonners, double majors, athletes, any type of person. How available is it for students to study abroad?
I think there's a lot of flexibility, but depending on what your situation is, you have to plan early. That, as Max said earlier, any program is available to any major, but I think there are some majors that their coursework is very tightly prescribed. And so it's a little more difficult to fit it in if you haven't planned from the very first time you walk into your advisor's office. I think it can become more difficult to have any flexibility. And I would say the same is true for some of the other scenarios. So you asked about Bonners, athletes, and what was the third one?
Double majors.
So for double majors, I think that would be the case, that you would really have to plan, but there is some flexibility there. And in part because you can fulfill gen ed requirements on our programs. So you're going to have to fulfill those anyway, but you could fulfill them in a classroom in Richmond, Indiana, or in Jordan. I'll talk about Bonners, and then maybe Max can talk about athletes, because he was one. Bonners definitely can study abroad. Part of the reason that works so well is because most of our placements, as I said, most of our programs, as I said before, have volunteer placements or some sort of a service learning component. And so a lot of our students who are Bonners can go on the program and fulfill their Bonner volunteer requirements through that.
Yes, athletes absolutely can study abroad. Obviously, it depends on when your season is and then when the programs that you're interested in are going. I played football here for 3 years, so I missed my sophomore season because I really knew that I wanted to do the Germany-Austria study abroad program. So yeah, it depends on when the program is going and when your season is, but I think the May term is always a great opportunity. If you're maybe a basketball player and your season spans both semesters, the May term is something you should definitely take a look at, because the shorter length of the May term doesn't mean it's going to be less impactful and less wonderful. And yeah, I've done a semester long and a May term, and they were both really incredible. So I certainly hope that any athletes who come will seriously consider studying abroad or off campus, because it's great and you can.
And I also think our coaches understand that students are student athletes. And so I think a lot of our coaches are understanding if a student decides that the program that they really want to do happens to be during the season. I think a lot of students choose a program that doesn't conflict with their season, but there are some times where you can't get around that. And I think our coaches tend to be pretty understanding about that.
Rachel from Kentucky had asked about community service while studying abroad, but I think it would be cool to talk a little bit more about that, because that's something that I think is really unique to the Earlham programs, that that's so encouraged. So maybe, Anastasia, do you want to talk about what your experience was?
Yeah, absolutely. Mine was more like an internship placement, but you could argue that some of the work that my friends did while in the program was community service. So we did, I personally, I was really lucky to intern with an independent journalist and fulfill my journalism and PAG's requirement for internship. And it was really very spontaneous because I didn't really have a set of things. I kind of assisted her in many different things that she was doing, starting with field work. She was working for the New York Times and some Huffington Post. She had a blog in Huffington Post. So that, and some research and some social media outreach for the events she was co-hosting and co-organizing in Jordan. One of my friends did a very intense research project in the University of Jordan, and another person did, actually, speaking of community service, I think I can talk about two of my friends did a teaching kind of internship in a primary school. So they, once a week, they would come and they have lesson plans and they would teach some basic English. And that was really cool. They loved it. They were really tired and emotionally exhausted sometimes, but very rewarded because they loved what they were doing and interaction with kids. And it was one of those places that didn't really have access to, maybe an English professor or a person who could come and speak English to them and stuff. So they did a really good job with that. And yeah, maybe Max and Jennifer, you can add.
Well, when I was in Mexico, I probably spoke at about a 4th grade level, so I didn't do this, but some of the people on the program with me taught at an elementary school, and that was a kind of community service experience for them. Yeah, that's my good example.
And I think the placements take on slightly different forms depending on the program. For example, in Northern Ireland, the placements are all what we call cross-cultural placements. So there's some sort of way of integrating both Protestant and Catholic perspectives in a variety of ways. So for example, you might work in an art gallery that showcases work from artists who are both Protestant and Catholic, or you might serve as a classroom assistant in what's called an integrated school, where there are kids who are both Protestant and Catholic. So really, they're all organizations that are seeking to do conflict resolution in a creative kind of way by bringing people from both perspectives together. In London, it might take on a very different kind of form, where you're doing all sorts of work in different kinds of social service agencies. So it just really depends on where the program is located.
This might also be a good time to talk about, for example, the Philadelphia program and the New York Arts program, some of our domestic off-campus study programs, which are much more internship-based.
Mm-hmm. So I love both of these programs. Both of these are approved programs. They're run by other schools in the GLCA. We have an agreement with these other schools that we have the Border Studies program and the Japan Study program, that other students in the GLCA can go on our programs, and then they offer up different programs. So one of those is the Philadelphia program, one of those is New York Arts, and our students can go on those programs. In the Philadelphia Center program, students do pretty much what amounts to a kind of a full-time internship. It's about 32 hours a week. They take 2 courses. They live in an apartment in the city with that they find on their own. They they have roommates. They budget for their own food. They practice interviewing and putting together resumes. And it's just a really neat experience that students have of doing all these things that you're going to have to do anyway in life after school, but you get to do it with a little bit of a safety net under you to kind of practice. It's a nice intermediary step, I would say, between college and the real world. And New York Arts is very similar, but it's more of an artisan. It's more of an arts-based program, so the internship takes on more of like an apprenticeship with an artist, and it's arts broadly defined. So it might be journalism, it might be throwing pots, it might be...
Could be film for Zaina from Maryland.
Yes, it could be film, it could be just production, music, any wide range of things. It's a really interesting program, but you're working, it's sort of a full-time internship with that artisan, and then you're also doing some academic work and some reflection on that experience and living in New York City. So both really cool experiences.
Timothy was wondering, why would a student potentially choose to do a program that wasn't through Earlham, one of the approved programs?
I think the main reason, I think there are 2 reasons. Maybe one is that a student wants to go to a place where we just simply don't offer a program. And that happens sometimes. We have a upcoming program in Ecuador that will be the first time. But until we offered that, we didn't have a program that was in South America. We had one in Nicaragua, which is in Central America, but not in South America. And it's a place where a lot of our students have had a lot of interest. So we had some students who would go to Ecuador through different programs. Another is that maybe a student just is a little more independent and wants to kind of branch out on their own and do it that way. So I think those are kind of the 2 main reasons. I think some students are limited by the financial aid factor. Unfortunately, when you do a program that's not an Earlham program, and it's not an approved program, your financial aid does not travel with you. So what you would have to do is take a leave of absence from Earlham, go on that program, and then transfer your credits back. So it becomes a little more complicated, but we certainly have students who do it.
Timothy also wanted to hear more about how your study abroad in Jordan furthered your peace and global studies major, Anastasia.
Yeah, I definitely did. I would also say that after I came back, I realized that I'm really interested in declaring a Middle East Studies minor, which by the time I was a senior, I realized I took enough courses that were qualifying for Middle East Studies, and like some of them were PAGs as well. But it's, especially at this time, I think it's important like never before to go and live in the Middle East and to be able to actually immerse in a community that to learn from, Muslims and Arabs, what they really think about what's going on. And a lot of times, my politics professor there was, he was Jordanian, and he was offering us an incredibly new and, I would say, shocking insight on how many Arabs and Middle Eastern, I guess, in countries in the Middle East perceive the role of the U.S., the role of other countries, and what's happening right now. And it's especially amazing to learn and to be there and learn about these things as some major events unfold. Like, for instance, a couple of years ago, yes, my good friend Ariel, who actually happened to be a program assistant when I went abroad, she went there, and she was in Jordan right when the Arab Spring started. And so even though it didn't affect Jordan as much, but she was there, and they were seeing the effects that were happening that could be seen in Jordanian society. And there are many, many speculations about why things in Jordan didn't turn out the way that things turned out in neighboring countries. But just the experience that she came back with, she was able to share it here. And I think she was at the panel in various places, like on campus, and it was just an incredible experience to just feel it, to just be there and be able to not just learn from articles in the newspapers online, but to be able to hear people's stories. Like the last thing I'll say, because I know I can talk a lot about this program, but my really like challenging experience was meeting Syrian refugees and having a conversation with them about, you know, the role of Russia in supporting Syria. So, well, for my friends, Americans, it was more like, why does the U.S. not do anything, or they shouldn't be doing this? For me, it was more like, but what do Russians think about, you know, involvement of Putin and all that and his support? Or it was incredibly challenging, but I learned so much from it as a citizen, I guess now I've been to many countries, I would say global, as well as a Russian citizen, or like a personal with a responsibility towards the people I meet and, you know, all over the world. So, yeah.
And after a moving story like that, we're going to do a quick poll here. So there's going to be a question that comes up on your screen asking about your level of interest in studying abroad, and we'll see how all of you respond, especially after these awesome stories. Do, 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 do. So, have you thought about studying abroad? Obviously, because you're here, but let's see how much. Come on, click your thing. Wow, 90% of you say absolutely without a question, and 10% have a pretty good idea. Great, so I'm glad that we've been able to foster some interest here. We're getting sort of near the end of our web chat, so if you do have any lingering questions, please send those in now. But in the meantime, I think it would be cool to just learn a little bit about our designation of distinction in global engagement, which is another thing that Earlham does to sort of encourage studying off campus.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it. You can fill them in if I miss something. The designation is essentially a way to document officially the things that students do that show their engagement with the world, and not only with their major or the specific things that they're involved with on campus. So it's a way to show on your transcript that you've studied abroad, that you've been engaged in these things with a global focus. That's not a great explanation. I don't know if you can add anything to it.
I think so. I think it came about because we were realizing that these are all things that students are doing anyway. And it's a way to provide something on a student's transcript that sets them apart for having done all of these things. I think we're really proud of the way we do internationalism on campus, the way it's very multifaceted. So it's not just a study abroad experience. It's also that the things you're learning about in your courses, maybe your housing situation. Maybe you are a Bonner Scholar and you're volunteering in town at Amigos, which is an organization where they teach English as a second language to recent immigrants. So I think it's a way of tying those experiences together and getting students to think comprehensively about the different experiences they've had and finding for them what's the common thread, what that ties it all together. So it's different for each student. It may be that for one student they study abroad through a May term, and then they do some volunteer work and their coursework and some other things. It may be that for another student they may not necessarily study abroad at all, but they're able to articulate some other things that they have done. So I think it's very unique. But students write an essay that ties all of those experiences together, and there's kind of a menu of different options that they can put together. Are you doing it?
Yes, I'm doing it. And actually, I found out about it after I came back. And I thought that it would be great just, again, to reflect on how my studies, how my academic background, I guess, intersects with what I've done professionally, I would say, at this point. Because in Jordan, particularly, I was able to try myself in many different things. And now I'm actually emphasizing them as I'm applying to many jobs, and I think that really makes me, well, stand out to some extent as an international student who had these experiences, also like outside of the U.S. But what I meant is that I think when you graduate, you don't just have an idea of, yes, I have academic background in peace and global studies and Middle East studies, but you actually can you can share with the employer or people you work with, or if you do community service, what are those particular things that you already can offer. And these come from that intersection of academics and international experience, whether it's living in a family or doing community service or doing internship abroad. So they all tie together really well and make you just a really good kind of, when it comes to practical things after graduation as well.
And it does tie together the curricular and the co-curricular too. I guess I didn't say that very clearly, but yeah.
Cool. Tatiana, thank you, Tatiana, for asking this wonderful question, because you guys are just going to be so happy that you get to answer this question. What does Earlham do to help students assimilate to the culture when they're studying abroad? And I would like to you can't see me, and I'm not going to get in front of the camera, but having studied abroad on a program that was not affiliated with my school, it can sometimes be very isolating. And I think that the way Earlham helps students with that transition process is really special. And so that's why I think this is such a great question. But you guys can go ahead and answer it.
I can talk about the pre and post, and then you can
share
talk
some
about your
details.
experiences. Sure. So we've had orientation prior to programs for a long time. That's required. So it's a semester-long orientation during the semester prior to a student's departure for their program. In the last 2 years, we've actually changed that orientation slightly, and it's a little more comprehensive. So it's a semester-long course. Some of the sessions that the students do in that course are all groups together, and we talk about intercultural learning. We talk a little bit about culture shock, and students also work then in their individual groups to prepare for their experience in their unique place where they are. And then we also, as a kind of the other bookend to that experience, have the second part of that course. So it's Cross-Cultural Explorations 1 and 2. And in that second part, we help them to unpack their experiences a little bit. So thinking about, what did you experience while you were there? And how can you use some of those experiences moving forward into thinking about integrating it into your coursework, integrating it into your career. But what do we do on site?
So I had a very great preparation. My professors just sat down with us and talked about Jordan, particularly with girls too, because it was really important. So they were thoughtful, and they were like, we have to have a session with the girls from the previous group who went and talk about all the details that might be so challenging to someone as a foreigner and a woman. And I guess particularly again in my program, professors visited. So we had a coordinator that she lives in Jordan. So, but then some people from several professors came to see how we were doing and spend a week with us in Jordan, and that was really, really amazing. And you are always in touch. You're always free to send an email, to Skype if you really need something. So it's really important. Yeah, they're always there for you.
I think one of the special things about these programs, the Earlham programs, is that you prepare, as Jennifer said, as a group, and you go as a group and you come back as a group. And so you can learn from each other as you're getting ready for exciting, maybe a little bit scary experiences. And then while you're there on the ground, you're off in your different host families, but you come together every day or quite often every week, and you can discuss the things that you're experiencing. And those are usually, in addition to the academics, you can discuss all the things that you're just experiencing by living in those countries, which is challenging, but can teach you a lot. And then we have the faculty members who are there with you, and they maybe are experiencing the same challenges, but they know a lot about how to get through these, how to learn from these experiences. And so I think it's really powerful to be able to have those experiences together and coming back to campus together is really wonderful too, because you've experienced all these really intense things together, and you can continue to learn from them, you know, through the end of your time at Earlham and afterwards. It's not like, I mean, Jennifer explained that we have this program for this course for when you return, but you will continue to learn from these experiences as you think about them, and you'll make connections to the courses you take after you get back. And so it really lasts more than a semester, and being part of a group that went and then came back helps make it a continually educational experience, continually.
And just one quick thing to add, I would say in the field of international education, it's becoming more and more apparent that it's really important for students in their cultural learning to have what's called intervention, which means having someone, like Max said, who checks in with you on a regular basis to help you process the things that you're experiencing while you're experiencing them. And when I go to conferences and I hear that, I'm always really proud that this is actually the way we've always done our programs. This is the way our model has always been, and that's always been a really integral part of the way we do international programs, that reflection component on the things that you are experiencing while you're experiencing them, and also after you return.
So we're running out of time here, and a few of you have submitted questions that we weren't able to get to, and so we will email you directly with answers to those questions, and we thank you very much for submitting them. But there is a post-web chat survey that we would love it if you would please take part in, and thank you very much for coming. And we have our last web chat in the Features of Earlham series tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be talking about student life, and then be on the lookout for some emails about our academic programs web chat series, which will be in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for coming, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.